My name's Joel Sherman. I'm with Evan Schwartzmiller, and welcome to the Invent Podcast. On this week's episode of the Invent Podcast, Evan and I talk about why we chose to brand ourselves with a single word. We also break down the things that we think can take an individual anywhere they choose. We call them the 3 Ps. Okay, so in today's episode, we're going to be talking about the origin of Invent, why we've tried to brand ourselves with this one word meaning, and kind of the ideals that we value that relate to the word as a whole. So let's start off with Invent. I don't know, we wanted to pick it, we kind of agreed that we wanted to pick a word that kind of encompassed all of our ideals as people, what we personally value. So what's your take on that?
So we chose Invent. I'm going to talk about the story where we actually did it. We were running in the woods. We were on it was a 5-mile run or whatever. And we were talking about this, saying, how should we brand ourselves? How should we, advertise to the world what we are and who we are? And I remember you said invent, and then we threw a few other words around, but invent stood out because it means so much to so many different people. I'm trying to think. I mean, there's
the premise behind it for us was going back. We wanted it to be one word, and we wanted it to mean a lot of different things. And what we kind of settled on, we were running through the woods, like Evan said, and we were throwing ideas and words back and forth, and invent stuck the most with us because it encompasses what we like to call the 3 Ps, and that is pursuit, passion, and purpose. So I'd like to go into more detail specifically about each one of those words. So let's start off with pursuit, and that is the pursuit of knowledge.
Yeah, so we the pursuit of knowledge. Now, when you think of an inventor, you think of Thomas Edison, Tesla, even back to ancient Greeks, that there was this thirst for knowledge, that there was this drive to know more about the world around you, the natural world, how things worked, how you could make things easier for people. And, this can go beyond just tinkering with, devices or stuff like that, being a quote-unquote inventor. This can be an everyday kind of thing. Reading books, learning about things, around. It's amazing, everything that goes into the things around, like a mouse, computer, everything, cars. Our society is so technologically advanced. It's really amazing when you actually look at things around you and you're like, wow, that's amazing that, this works, but I take it for granted, it is amazing.
And when you invent, you are always constantly pursuing knowledge. You're pursuing something more, something deeper. And this word invent comes back around again. Regardless if you're trying to invent something specific or if you are trying to invent the life that you want, you need to be pursuing knowledge that you don't have. You need to be reading, you need to be writing, you need to be learning. Something that you constantly can work on and something that is endless. There's so many different, avenues of knowledge out there and things you can learn about your particular field or about life or about some subtopic that you're interested in. And all of those, fundamentally lead to growth in one way or another.
Yeah, it leads to growth as a person, as who you are. I'm not the same person I was a year ago or 5 years ago or 10 years ago. There was always this pursuit of, I've always loved learning. It's always been instilled in me from my parents and my peers, that love of learning. But, it doesn't have to be like a task. You don't, it's one of those things. If you develop it over time, you start catching yourself wanting to know, and you have to have that want to pursue,
and
the knowledge.
That's not school either.
Yeah,
I think a lot of people are like, man, I'm not a good student, and I think both of us are good students. We just naturally are, but you don't have to be. You know, when you're passionate about something and you're pursuing knowledge on subjects that you're interested in, it's never a task. It's never something that is a chore. It's always something that you can look forward to. And don't get me wrong, I'm sure there's times when, I mean, even I in my studies, like, I'm learning a theory that I know is important for me to learn, but you know, I might rather be doing something else. But at the end of the day, that experience and that knowledge and that pursuit, it makes you feel good, and it ultimately contributes to you becoming a better person, an inventor, a learner.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and even if you don't view yourself as a good student, your brain, it's like a muscle. You can train it, you can work with it, you can develop it. So it is like a muscle, like an arm muscle or a leg muscle, in that way that you can develop it, you can work on it, you can work it out. So it's never too late. A lot of people say, well, I'm not a good student, I'm not a good learner. You just got to find what you're interested in, what you're willing to learn about.
And think about all the ways you can learn. I remember, I think his name's Ernest Cline. He was the author of Ready Player One. I think that's his name. I was watching an interview by him, and they were asking, the interviewer asked Ernest if, what does he ever become bored of his job writing all the time? And his response was, I don't write all the time. Ready Player One, for those of you who don't know, is a science fiction novel based in the future about like virtual reality and stuff like that. And he said, I don't have to be writing all the time. My learning and my research, it comes from watching science fiction movies and reading science fiction books and spending time with my children and like going out into the world and observing things and stuff like that. If you can find fun ways to learn based on your career path, like, that's great. Like, if you love writing and, learning for you could be watching movies.
Yeah. And I think that's perfect. We live in such an age that we always, we're getting bombarded with information, which isn't always a good thing. Sometimes we're a little too plugged in all the time. But at the same time, we have so much information available to us all the time. And I think that's something we can definitely take advantage of, something that we can use as a tool. There are definitely disadvantages of being on the screen all the time. You definitely want to unplug, but, there's such great tools, our phones, computers. There's so much information out there that we can share with each other, that we can, look up if we have a question or something like that. So
I think oftentimes people get, they don't really understand how useful it is. Oftentimes people where they could be learning and they could realize that they're learning, they're using it for entertainment.
Yeah.
Like, if you're watching a documentary, you're learning. You know what I mean? But that also serves as like that entertainment purpose aspect, and like you can even break it down even farther. You could be analyzing the documentary as a film, or you could be learning about what the documentary is about. Things you can break so many different things down into smaller levels and different aspects, and you can use those as tools to learn. And I think another great thing about you talking about the internet is you can do whatever you want. You can monetize your interests. You know what I mean? Like, if you like Pokemon, go make a YouTube channel about Pokemon. And sure, it might take some time to get off, and you have to be smart about it if you want to think of it as a business. But you can do anything you want with this tool that we have.
Yeah, for sure. There's definitely a lot of opportunities out there, and a lot of these opportunities we don't even know about. That's the thing with this invent. They're always looking to the past. Or what did this person do? What did that person do? Which is good. Looking at what other people did. But at the same time, we are here to invent the future. As individuals, we can shape the future, and there's going to be points where we're going to have to take a risk and say, this is something that I came up with by myself. This is original. Is it worth it? Am I willing to put in the work? So,
and I think that's a great segue to lead us into the second P, which is passion.
Yeah, passion.
Which is doing what you love. Your niche, your desire, your goals. And one thing that, I value this one very highly on the list. I think this is probably one of the like the top important one. If you don't have anything else, have passion, because if you're doing what you love, you'll be happy. Yeah. Bottom line, you'll be happy. If you wake up every morning excited to go to work because you love it, how can you be unhappy?
Yeah. And passion, like the double meaning, maybe not double meaning, but the other thing associated with it is you're willing to put in the work and to suffer a little bit to get things done. You love doing this, or you love, like you said, going to work every day, or you love, learning about this topic. You are willing to sacrifice time, you could be doing other things. You are willing to put in the work for whatever it is you're doing.
It's a 12-hour shift doesn't seem so bad.
Yeah.
Or whatever the case may be. And I think there's definitely a shift in our generation from, say, our parents' generation, our grandparents' generation. We're seeing more people kind of attracted to this idea of doing what they love, rather than going to college for 4 years and getting a 9-to-5. I think we see a very big push for entrepreneurship, and even now, like on the YouTube space and other online areas, it's very hard to grow an audience now because so many people are interested in doing it. You know what I mean? And but that's great. That's a great thing.
It's competition.
Because if there's a ton of people doing it and there's so much competition, that means that people are passionate, and that's so important, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's getting to the point where if you're wanting to be successful, it's always been like this, but especially you're saying the YouTube space, or, the social media space, you have to be passionate in order to be successful. And if you can instill that in yourself, if you can, find something that you are passionate about, and you're willing, to put in the work, you can do anything. You can do anything.
Exactly. And on a personal level, from my experience, I've always been interested in storytelling. Growing up, being told stories my whole life, being intrigued by that, loving reading and books and movies, and just kind of being drawn into deeper understandings of things from, stories. So I'm here. I study at school communications because I think understanding interpersonal relationships and learning how to speak publicly and understanding audiences, it all factors into my ability to tell stories. And I think that is my passion, is no matter what I do, I always want to be able to share experiences and stories with others. And however I can find that, I will. And right now that is doing the podcast, or filming a video with my friends, or live streaming on Twitch. Mixing the things I've kind of grown up with, sports and video games, with this idea of storytelling. It kind of pulls all my experiences into one avenue, and this goes back to our last point. I can kind of put that all on the internet and hopefully monetize it one day. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
And I know for you, you made a switch in your major because you realized that you weren't passionate about what you were doing before.
Yeah, that's one thing. You can think something's gold and think, oh, this is the best thing ever. But then once you get into it, you're like, well, maybe this isn't for me. This isn't for me. There's definitely a lot of things that we can do to try to limit that. You don't want to rush into things like, oh, this is gonna be the job for the rest of my life. And then you get in there and you're like, oh, this is the second day. Like, this is terrible. I don't want to do this. But passions shift, they change, they develop. It's just like, as you grow, you become passionate about different things. Your interests change. So,
and some people find that passion because they want a family. Yeah. They want to have a wife and kids, and they don't care what job they have as long as it's, they have enough time off. They have a certain amount of vacation, and they make a certain amount of money. And Like, that's fine. Not everybody has to be a business owner. Not everybody has to be an entrepreneur. Not everybody has to work 12 hours a day, wake up at 4, grind. You know what I mean? That's not for everybody. And I think that's like the life that I want to kind of pursue for a little while anyways. But some people would be perfectly happy graduating college with a job, settling down, whatever the case may be. And I think it's just important that everybody finds that for themselves. That you're never stagnant. You're never stuck in a situation that you don't want to be in. You're never constricted by a situation that you don't want to be in. So passion is a huge thing.
Yeah.
Huge.
Yeah, if you have passion, you can rise above that. You can rise above whatever, bad circumstance you're in. If you have passion for something, you can get out of that and you can get somewhere where you want to be.
Yeah, it's what propels you to start that business. It's what propels you to quit your job and apply for a new one. It's what propels you to change your major.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Exactly.
It's what makes you wake up, get out of bed first thing in the morning. Mm-hmm. It's what gives you. It's ultimately what gives you happiness. Mm-hmm. In the end, it's what fuels your desire to achieve. Because if you don't have that passion, why would you work towards it? Why would you work towards that? You know what I mean?
Yeah, and that goes perfectly into the third one. Purpose. You have to have the why factor. Why is this important to me? Is this going to make me happy? And that's something that people confuse a lot, I think, is, I want, the huge house, all the really nice cars, the huge, they think that's going to make me happy. And while, having these things might make life easier in some ways, that's not going to make you happy. I mean, for some it might, but for a lot of people it won't. And they work their entire lives in a job they don't like, or they do things, that they don't like, and they get there and like, what? Okay, like, yeah, I have all this money, but I feel there's a hole in my heart that, and isn't filled by the money.
That's a human thing. That is something everybody struggles with, I think. Some people it's definitely easier for others. And there's a quote by Jim Carrey. He says, I wish everybody could be rich so they could realize that it's not the source of happiness. Something like that. If you want to find that would be great. But I've never been in a situation where I was like super rich or I had a ton of money and I had all the things that I wanted. But I still realized how important passion, pursuit, purpose. I realized that the purpose of what I wanted to do ultimately led me to fulfill that passion. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. The why factor is so important. I grew up in a very compassionate and loving household, so that was easy for me to find. And I think I've struggled with that a lot recently, was purpose. Because sometimes it's hard to find. You just don't know why you're doing things. But I actually had a really crazy experience this past weekend that I want to tell you about. I was at the gym. Evan and I had spring break, and we were visiting home. And I was at the gym at home, and I was lifting with one of my old friends, Darren. And we were planning to use the sauna for about 10 or 15 minutes after the workout. And we walked in, and it was really hot. There was a man in there, and he was definitely a regular because, the sauna was really going. And my friend and I were talking about some BS. I don't know. We were talking about. I don't think it had any meaning or anything. But I got talking about the upcoming 50-mile race that Evan and I are going to run in November. And I was going on about how I didn't know why I wanted to do it. And the guy that was in there, he was a middle-aged man. He interrupted me, in the middle of my conversation. He was like, hey, man, how old are you? I was 18, almost 19, which wasn't, odd. Usually you'll strike up a conversation with some guys in the sauna. And he looked at me and he said, yeah, I can tell, which kind of, caught me off guard. I was like, okay, dude. Yeah. He said, I heard you talking about the race. and my wife and I are going to run 500 miles over the course of 3 months. And he looked at me and he said, the reason you're doing this is because you're going to bring up others. And he said, other people are going to look at you accomplishing your goals, and it will encourage them to achieve their goals. And then he said, I get the chance to talk in front of 200, 300 people at a time, and that's what I try to talk about the most, is encouraging others. And he said he lived by this motto called be encouraged. And I think that has a lot to do with what we're talking about here and the idea that I want to push forth in the world. And then he asked me what I wanted to do with my life. And I said, I thought I knew. I want to be an author. I maybe do some speaking. That's what I told him. And he said, so you want to be before people? And I said, yes, sir. And he said, well, you've got a good head on your shoulders at 18. And I know that because you're in here at the gym getting your body right. He said that to me. He said, one thing I'll tell you is if you want to motivate people, you need to make sure you have all your stuff figured out, because the audience won't listen to you unless you're good, unless you know what you're talking about. And then he said, another thing I'll say is that you're unbiased, which is what you need for, he's like, this is what you need for your kind of work. And I was a little confused because, I had said a few words to this guy. How did he know I was honest, and how did he know I was unbiased? And after he told me those things, I was like, I try to be, I may not always be unbiased, but I try. And the next thing he said to me was what made me restructure my whole perception of the conversations, because I'm not going to lie that I didn't think he really had a place telling me all these things. It's just this random guy. But he said to me, he was like, you see, I'm a pastor. And that's why I told you I speak in front of 200 to 300 people at a time. And I believe that everything has a purpose, and it seems like you're on your path to yours. He said, I was going to come to the gym later today, but I decided last minute to just come now and get it done with, and now I know why I came. It was to meet you two guys in here. You see, when you're standing in front of 10,000 people and you have a bestseller, you're going to remember this conversation, maybe even write or speak about it. This moment for you is important for your career. I'm here to make sure that you understand your purpose, to be encouraged. And what blew my mind is I never told this guy that I visualized standing in front of thousands of people in an audience and having my own bestseller. I told him I wanted to be an author and maybe do some speaking. Very vague. And I believe that he was, put in my life for that reason. It's crazy. It still kind of blows my mind when I think about it and recall now, because I felt like he just knew so much about me. And, I barely even knew the guy. And that's the why factor for me, I've realized through my struggles recently. But what I want to do, and the reason why I want to run 50 miles in November, the reason why I want to write a best-selling book, the reason why I want to deliver powerful speeches in front of 10,000 people is to encourage others, because I think that's the most important thing that you can do.
Yeah, that is an amazing story. People in our lives, random people. It doesn't even have to be a random person. It can be your family, your friends. How they can motivate you. They can push you in the right direction. They can help you find the right path for you. Give you that passion. It's amazing how we're always looking at athletes and superstars for inspiration. Which there's nothing wrong with. But if you got to look around you, there are people in your life right now who are there for you, who want the best for you, and who are willing to give you advice, to talk you through things. So it's very important to look around, look around at your family, your roommate, people who are close to you, and not always just, I wish I could be like this guy, or I wish I could meet this person. There's nothing wrong with that. There's some really, really great superstars out there, some good celebrities and stuff, but sometimes you got to sit back and look around and say, hey, this person's important in my life. They've taught me so many things. Yeah, I need to listen to them. So,
and I think that story also goes to show that you don't need to be a superstar or an athlete or a celebrity to make a positive change in the world. I think that so many people get bogged down on the idea that they have to make it, when in reality, this guy who I met in the sauna, who I probably won't see again in my life, changed my life so much. And in doing that, and in telling me to be encouraged and showing me that idea kind of as a whole, if I make it, if I'm speaking in front of 10,000 people, that's not my message. I'm not telling those people that I'm speaking to. That's not my message. That's his. And maybe that's not his message. Maybe that's somebody else's. Maybe that's somebody who told him. And I think that's what's so beautiful about it, is that pastor who lived in Winchester, who met me in the sauna, he those little things carry so much value in life. And I think that by our little interactions, we can impact people way more than we think.
And that's, you mentioned like little actions, little things. And I think if we can pay attention to the small things that every day, if we can, sit back and look and say, this is what I do every day. How can I change that? How can I make that better? That's when the big things, it starts, it's like a wall, it's, like a building. You got to start from the bottom and you add little by little. And then eventually it becomes this huge, beautiful building, but if you ignored the mortar or the bricks, these small things, the building would collapse.
How can I make today count? How can I lay this brick perfectly? And then you wake up the next morning and you lay the next brick perfectly on top of that one. Yeah. And then ultimately in the end,
beautiful cathedral, huge, beautiful building.
And that kind of brings me to another story about those little things, making an impact on everybody that you can. Kindness. There's a story, his name's Houston Kraft. He's a kindness advocate. He travels around the country and speaks to schools about the importance of being kind and loving one another. And he said he was on an airplane and he sat next to a woman and she said, "What do you do for a living?" And he said, "I'm a kindness advocate." And she said, "Oh my gosh, I believe in kindness." And he was like, "Yeah, like most people believe in kindness, And she told him the story about how she was at work and she got a call from the hospital and it said, "You need to come get on a plane right now to come see your father. He's gonna die." And she said to him, I immediately left. I booked a plane ticket. I didn't even pack my things. The first thing I did was get on an airplane. And when I got on the airplane before we took off, and I got another call and said that she said my dad had passed away. And she tried not to cry the whole time on the flight. When it landed, she walked out of the airplane, fell to her knees, and began sobbing on the airport floor. And 3,000 people, she had to guess, walked past her. In the 2-hour period, she sat there and cried, and not a single person stopped and said and asked her what was wrong, asked her if she was okay, asked her if she needed help. And when I heard that, I was like, I don't know if I would have stopped, And I think that's definitely a mental check we all need to do, is try to make little changes here and there and try to affect people in a positive way, little by little, and because they could go a long way.
Ask ourselves, would we have stopped? It's good. It's good to look in and say, kind of do like a mental check. Am I being nice to the people around me? Am I being kind? Am I being,
compassionate, humane?
Yeah.
Empathetic.
And it's very easy to not be. We always talk, they're mean. There's mean people and there's good people, or good and bad. Where, as humans, there's a lot of both in us. You can let the bad take over, let the good take over, and there's a mix. Am I being nice to this person but being mean to this person? So it's not black and white. There's a lot of mix.
It's always a constant battle with yourself, I think, too. I think that it's always you having to look inward and reflect and say, what did I do wrong there and what did I do well?
Yeah.
But I think that's a great place to end. Thank you guys so much for watching today's episode. I apologize, but our camera died with about 5 minutes left in the recording. If you enjoyed the episode, please support us by subscribing on whatever platform that you're using to listen. Today, we're going to end with a quote by Jay Shetty. If you guys haven't checked out his podcast, it's called On Purpose. It's #1 on iTunes right now. He said, "No matter how rich, talented, or educated you are, how you treat people says everything about you."